His hands were on either side of my head, breath heavy, chest rising fast. "Say it," he growled against my throat. "Say you're not her." I couldn't, not with his mouth crashing into mine, not with the way his body moved like he was trying to forget someone else's name by writing mine into his skin. Sheets twisted beneath us, his grip bruised, desperate, like every touch was a question he wasn't ready to hear the answer to. "You stayed," he whispered, "and now I can't let you go. If that left you breathless, like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss what happens next. Because this love, it's only just getting started." There were 3 things I knew, with absolute certainty that morning. My sister was getting married. I was not the one wearing the dress. I preferred it that way. At 8:32 a.m., I was crouched on the hardwood floor of our family's cramped bridal shop in the north end of Boston, threading pearls back onto the hem of a ruined veil. I'd been up all night fixing a zipper that snapped from stress, ironically a metaphor for the bride herself. My fingers were raw, my shoulders ached, and the scent of pressed silk and hairspray clung to my skin like guilt. Outside, cars crawled past the frosted display window, honking at nothing, as if the city itself could sense that something was about to come undone. Isabella was supposed to be the perfect bride. The one with the figure, the face, the charm. She moved through the world like she owned the air other women breathed. And me? I was the quiet sister, the one who stayed in the back, hemming dreams into dresses that were never mine. At 9 odd a.m. Sharp, she was supposed to be in the shop for final touch-ups. At 9:01, she wasn't answering her phone. At 9:07, I found the note. It was folded in half on the stool beside the dressing mirror, tucked under a single ivory bobby pin like a farewell kiss. "I can't do this. Don't follow me. No signature. No apology." The air left my lungs in one hard punch. I stood there, frozen, staring at the curling edge of the paper, praying it would vanish if I blinked hard enough. But it didn't. By 9:15, my mother had gone pale. By 9:16, my father was screaming into the phone, and by 9:30, I was in the back room, being zipped into the dress. "You look close enough," my mother whispered, voice trembling as she yanked the bodice tight. "Same build, same hair, same blood. Just walk, just smile." My knees buckled. "You're asking me to lie to a billionaire in front of hundreds of people. Do you hear yourself?" "We're not asking," my father growled. "We're begging." It wasn't just about shame. It was money, property, contracts already signed. Our family had bet everything on that union. Mortgaged the business, taken the Ravel investment deal. If we pulled out now, he'd bury us, so I said nothing. I stood there, sewn into the silk cage my sister had abandoned. My reflection blinked back at me, wearing her crown, her lipstick, her smile. Only the eyes were mine, dead and terrified. The car ride to the cathedral was a blur of radio static and nausea. I could hear my own heart louder than the engine. Outside the window, Boston blurred into light and glass. Everything looked sharp, unforgiving. As we arrived, the assistant ushered me through the side entrance. No one looked too closely. They weren't here for me. They were here for the dress. For the show. And as long as the woman walking down the aisle looked the part, the truth could stay buried. I stood behind the grand oak doors, moments away from walking into a lie that might just become my life. Then I saw him, Alexander Ravel. He stood at the altar like he had built it. Tall, devastating. Black tucks pressed like armor. His jaw, sharp enough to draw blood, and those ice-colored eyes that never flinched. He wasn't smiling. He didn't even blink. And he wasn't surprised. There was no double take, no furious demand. No, "Where is Isabella?" just a slow, cold look down the aisle, and then right at me, direct, surgical, knowing. He nodded once. "She ran," he said as I approached. "You stayed. That's all I need." The words sliced through me cleaner than the diamond on my finger ever could. I was breathing, but I wasn't alive. Not really. My voice caught in my throat, but I nodded anyway. The officiant began speaking, but I couldn't hear a word. My hands were shaking. The veil was too tight. The ring slid onto my finger before I realized what was happening. "Evie DeLuca," I thought. "Congratulations. You're officially a fraud." As we walked back down the aisle, side by side, I felt the heat of his body, the chill of his silence. His arm brushed mine, accidental or intentional, I couldn't tell, but my skin prickled. We reached the end of the aisle. Guests clapped politely, none the wiser. A perfect switch, a perfect lie. Until I glanced up at him, and he looked down at me. Not like a man fooled, not like a stranger, but like someone who had planned this all along. There was something in his eyes I couldn't name. Recognition, calculation, ownership. My chest tightened. This wasn't about being the second choice, I thought. It was about being the one he wanted to trap. I turned away quickly, but I could still feel his gaze like heat between my shoulder blades. He didn't say another word, but I knew. I wasn't stepping into my sister's life. I was stepping into something much darker. And the man beside me? He didn't marry the wrong bride by accident. He chose me, and I was about to learn why. The wedding photos never made it to the press. That was the first thing I noticed the morning after. No headlines, no coverage, not even a whisper on the society pages. For a man like Alexander Revell, a billionaire, CEO with more enemies than friends, that kind of silence wasn't an accident. It was a warning. I sat in the back seat of his town car, still wearing the remnants of bridal perfection. The tiara was gone. The heels had been replaced by flats, someone shoved into my hands backstage. But the dress, the same dress Isabella was meant to wear, clung to me like a second skin I couldn't peel off. The driver didn't speak. The man beside me didn't, either. Alexander sat like a statue, shoulders squared, one hand casually resting on his thigh, the other tapping slowly against the leather armrest. If I turned my head, I would have seen his profile. Angular, chiseled, composed. But I didn't. I couldn't. My palms were damp, my thoughts louder than the engine. This isn't a marriage. This is containment. When the car finally pulled up to a wrought iron gate somewhere in West Boston, the sheer size of the estate stole the breath from my lungs. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. Stone walls, grand staircases. The kind of place where people never ask questions, and secrets slept comfortably. "Home," he said, stepping out without looking at me. The front doors opened before he even touched the handle. Staff, silent, efficient, cold. And me, I followed like a stray animal someone forgot to leave behind. The house swallowed me whole. Mahogany and marble, chandelier light bouncing off glass surfaces. Everything smelled like cedar and stillness. I didn't belong here. Not in her dress. Not in his world. He led me into a hallway lined with oil paintings and unopened wedding gifts. At the end of it, he opened a door. Not the bedroom, not the study, but a suite tucked behind double doors. "This is yours." I stepped inside. It was larger than my childhood apartment. Cream bedding, a dressing table with a vase of white roses, a walk-in closet that was already full. I looked back at him, confused. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. The legal paperwork was already filed. As of 9:43 yesterday, "You are Mrs. Evangeline Revell." Mrs. Revell. The words hit. like cold water. "It doesn't matter that you're not Isabella," he continued, voice even. "The name on the license is yours now, and the press won't say otherwise." I blinked. "You knew I wasn't her?" His gaze narrowed, like, "That was the stupidest question I could have asked? You think I can't tell the difference between two sisters?" A flush rose to my cheeks, shame burning hot under my skin. "So why didn't you stop it?" He shrugged. "Because I needed a wife, and she ran." He stepped inside, just one pace, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of whiskey and something darker beneath. Ambition, maybe. Or control. "You showed up. That made you the better option." I hated how calm he sounded, as if choosing a wife were no different from swapping out a car lease. "I didn't show up," I said quietly. "I was dragged." "And yet," he replied, voice soft as velvet, "you said, 'I do.'" He let that hang in the air, like a noose I hadn't noticed tightening. Then he turned and left. No instructions. No goodnight. Just the click of the door closing behind. Him. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the center of the massive bed, staring up at the crown molding and wondering how I got here. My mind kept circling the same thought. What happens now? Would he expect that? Would he demand something I couldn't give? The answer came at 3:17 a.m. in the form of a knock. My spine went rigid. My heart tried to tear through my rib cage. I sat up, clutching the sheet-like armor, but it wasn't him. It was a staff member, middle-aged, gray suit, professional smile. "Mr. Ravel asked me to deliver this." She handed me a leather folder, then disappeared without a word. Inside was a document, multiple pages, legal language I barely understood, but 3 words stood out in bold at the top: Marital Agreement Addendum. It detailed everything: 1 year of marriage, discreet appearances at public events, no physical expectations unless mutually agreed upon, absolute confidentiality, divorce to be processed quietly after 12 months unless otherwise requested. I felt a strange mix of relief and humiliation. This wasn't marriage. It was theater. The next morning, I wandered the house like a ghost. Every room looked curated, perfectly positioned for someone who hadn't arrived. I passed unopened boxes labeled for Isabella. Dresses, shoes, jewelry, even the monogrammed stationery bore her name. Everywhere I turned, she existed more than I did. At the far end of the east wing, I found a music room. Grand piano, velvet curtains, books stacked neatly. I sat on the bench, ran my fingers over the keys. I hadn't played since I was a child. I pressed one note. It rang out, crisp and lonely. "You're not allowed in here." His voice landed like thunder. I turned sharply. Alexander stood in the doorway, tie loose, expression unreadable. I didn't mean to. He crossed the room in 3 steps, reached past me and slammed the piano lid shut. This room was hers. My chest tightened. "You said this marriage was real on paper only. That means I'm not taking anything from her." He stared at me for a long time. Too long. Then quietly he said, "Aren't you?" And he walked away. 3 days into being Mrs. Evangeline Ravel, I had yet to speak to my husband for more than 30 seconds at a time. He was a ghost with a pulse, appearing only for brief, polite meals, disappearing into his study the rest of the day, and saying little more than yes, no, or good night. But silence isn't the same as absence. Silence watches you. I felt it every time I walked into a room. The way the staff stiffened. The way doors seemed to close just a second too early, and especially the way his eyes followed me. Not openly, but just long enough to set my skin on fire. On the 4th day, I wandered down a hallway I hadn't noticed before. The Ravel estate was practically a maze, and this wing felt untouched, quieter, older, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookcases and walls painted in a deep, thoughtful green. Halfway down, I found the door slightly ajar. It wasn't locked. I should have turned back. I didn't. Inside was a private library, dim, masculine, cluttered with heavy furniture and the faint scent of cedar and whiskey. It was lived in a way the rest of the house wasn't. On the desk sat a decanter, half empty, next to an unlit cigar and a picture frame turned away from the door. I don't know what made me reach for it. Curiosity, maybe. Or the desperate need to see something that wasn't perfect. I turned the frame. The photo was of Isabella. She was in a red dress I'd never seen before, hair up, laughing, real laughter, not the one she used for cameras. Alexander stood beside her, one hand resting lightly on her back, his smile small, but unmistakably soft. They looked like two people in sync. I felt something hot twist in my chest. Then a voice broke through the quiet. That doesn't belong to you. I froze. He was standing in the doorway, jacket off, tie undone, and for the first time since our wedding, he looked not put together, not polished, raw. I set the frame down. I didn't mean to pry, but you did. He walked toward me, slow, deliberate. I backed away instinctively, bumping into the edge of the desk. I got lost, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This part of the house is off limits to guests. I almost laughed. I'm not a guest. You married me, remember? That stopped him. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, then colder. Only on paper. I bristled. Then why keep her picture here? Why not move on if this is just paperwork? He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Do you want the truth, Evangeline? Hearing him say my full name made me flinch. I keep her picture because I don't like forgetting. I don't like being caught off guard. And I certainly don't like being replaced. My throat tightened. Is that what I am? A replacement? He leaned in, too close. I could see the line of his jaw, the shadow under his eyes, the way his pupils dilated just slightly as they locked onto mine. You're not her, Evie. You're... He didn't finish. Just stepped back, raked a hand through his hair, and turned, away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of him, but because I was afraid of what I felt when he was near me. Not fear, not hatred. Something worse. Curiosity. The next morning, I pulled out a sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. Drawing helped me focus, quieted my nerves in a house that felt like a museum curated for someone else's life. I sat in the sunroom and started sketching the estate from memory. The sharp edges, the marble textures, the shadows that always seemed a little too long. I didn't notice he was there until his voice broke through the quiet. You were in the shop that day. I looked up. Alexander stood by the doorway, coffee in hand, suit flawless as always. But there was something else now, something unsettled. What day? The day she came in for the final fitting. You were there, sewing pearls into the hem. Blinked. Yes, I admitted. I remember. He nodded slowly. I noticed your hands first, the way you stitched without looking. The focus. You didn't even glance up when I walked in. I didn't know what to say to that. I remembered that day too. Not because he walked in, but because it was the first time my sister had ever looked nervous about anything. She said yes to the dress that day, I murmured. She didn't say yes to me, he replied. Silence fell between us. He walked toward me, took the sketchbook from my lap before I could protest, and studied it. You drew this from memory? I nodded. His thumb brushed the edge of the page, then, quietly, You see more than people expect." There was no flirtation in his tone, just observation, like he was cataloging a new fact about me, like I'd become real. Later that night, I found a new package in my room. Inside, charcoal pencils, a leather-bound sketch pad, a note in crisp handwriting. "If you're going to keep seeing, you might as well keep drawing. A." I stared at it for a long time. Not a gift. A message. He knew I didn't belong here, but maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to see that I wasn't trying to. The rain started just after noon, sheets of it hammering the estate windows like fists. By 4, the roads were slick and empty. By 5, the staff had retired to the servants' quarters. And by 6, I was alone in a house too large for one name. Alexander hadn't been home since morning. I didn't ask where he went. And he didn't say. I sat on the edge of my bed, sketchpad in hand, eyes locked on a half-finished drawing of the piano I wasn't allowed to touch. The rain hit harder, and my pencil slipped. I pressed too hard and tore the page. Something inside me snapped. I dropped the sketchpad, grabbed a coat, and walked out into the storm. The wind sliced against my skin, soaking through my thin cardigan in seconds. I didn't care. I needed air. I needed to breathe. I needed to scream into the kind of silence that wouldn't echo back. I walked barefoot, across the lawn, past the garden arches and the marble fountain shaped like a woman who looked far too serene for how the world actually worked. My hair clung to my neck. My hands shook. Everything felt too tight. Like the house, the contract, the title. I wasn't a wife. I was a placeholder, a signature, a walking reminder of someone who chose to run. And the worst part? I hadn't run. I'd stayed. I didn't hear the car until it slammed to a stop behind me. Headlights flooded the garden, cutting through the dark. The engine revved, then died. Alexander's voice followed, sharp, drenched in fury. "What the hell are you doing?" I turned, rain plastering my hair to my face. He stalked toward me, no coat, suit soaked, tie pulled loose around his neck. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked wild, uncontrolled, real. "Evie, answer me." I stood still, let the rain speak for me. His jaw clenched. "Are you trying to make a statement? Is this some kind of performance?" "Yes," I said, voice shaking. "I'm auditioning for the role of woman who completely lost herself. Do I have the part?" Something flickered in his expression. Then he closed the distance and grabbed my arm, not rough, not painful, but enough to make me feel the heat of his skin against my soaked one. "Get inside. Now." "No." His brows snapped together. "No?" I yanked my arm free. "You married me, Alexander. Not a mute ghost, not a paper bride. Me, Evangeline. And you've ignored me since the moment I put on this damn dress. You weren't supposed to be in it," he snapped. "I know." My scream cut through the storm. He stared at me, chest rising, breath uneven. The rain drenched us both, clothes clinging, water sliding down skin we didn't bother shielding. "I didn't want this," I said, quieter now. "Not like this. I'm not trying to take her place. I never was." Silence. Only rain. Then, in a voice I almost didn't hear, "But you did." My throat burned. "You think I asked for this?" "No," he said, and something in his face cracked, just for a second. "But you stayed." We stood there in the dark, unmoving, as thunder rolled behind us. His gaze dropped to my lips. My heart thudded once, hard. Then he did something I didn't expect. He took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. Not forcefully, gently. His hands lingered on my arms, warm against my soaked sleeves. "I don't hate you," he said quietly, "but I don't know what to do with you." I stared at him, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means you were supposed to be a lie I could live with." His voice was barely a whisper now. "And you're not." Back inside, he didn't speak again. He followed me upstairs, still wet, his hair falling over his forehead. He didn't stop at his room. He walked me to mine. At the door, he paused. "I'll send someone to bring you tea." I reached out before I could stop myself and touched his wrist, just for a moment. He flinched, not because of disgust, but like no one had touched him in a long time and meant it. "I'm not the ghost," I said softly. "You are." Then I stepped inside, closed the door, and leaned against it with shaking legs. That night, I didn't sleep. Again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was because for the first time since this strange marriage began, I felt something shift. Not between us, but in him. He'd called me a lie, then looked at me like I was the only truth left. The storm had passed, but something heavier lingered in the house. It was in the way the air stilled when I walked by. In the way Alexander looked at me now. Not with indifference, but with something darker. Something closer to hunger. And that hunger was starting to wake something in me, too. Something I didn't recognize. Something I couldn't name. It started with a mistake, or maybe it wasn't. I couldn't sleep. Again. So I wandered into the kitchen at midnight, barefoot, hair down, wearing nothing but a long t-shirt and silence. I thought I was alone, until I heard the low clink of ice against glass. Alexander stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, shirt undone just enough to show the hard line of his collarbone. He didn't move when I walked in. Just poured another inch of bourbon and watched me like a man watching a fuse burn too close. "You're up," I said. "So are you." His voice was quieter than usual. Rougher. Like gravel under velvet, I moved to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water. I could feel his eyes following me. Not politely, not casually. Hungry. And I hated how much I felt it. The tension between us wasn't new, but it had never been this loud. "You shouldn't walk around dressed like that," he said, still not looking away. I didn't back down. "This is my house too, isn't it?" He took a slow sip, set the glass down with a soft thud. "That's not what this is." "What is it then?" I asked, stepping closer. "Dangerous ground." I knew that. I walked anyway. He didn't move, didn't answer. So I pushed. "All this time you've been acting like I'm nothing but a name on paper, a substitute. But the way you look at me says something else." Still no answer. Just that stare. And I'm done pretending I don't see it. Then I made the mistake. I touched him. One hand, light, against his chest. A test. He grabbed my wrist, not gently, but not violently. His eyes darkened. "Don't," he said. "Why not?" "Because I won't stop." He kissed me like punishment. There was nothing soft about it, nothing tentative. Just heat and teeth, and the way his hand slid up the back of my neck to anchor me in place. I gasped into his mouth, but he didn't ease up. He deepened the kiss, swallowing my breath, walking me backwards until my spine hit the wall. His thigh slid between mine, parting them. My hands gripped his shirt to stay upright. He tasted like bourbon and something electric. "You should have run," he said, voice breaking between kisses. "I did," I whispered. "But I didn't go far enough." Groaned, low and guttural, before lifting me like I weighed nothing, carrying me to the kitchen island and setting me down on the cool marble. I barely had time to think. His hands were on me, gripping my waist, sliding under my shirt, pulling it off in one rough motion. His mouth followed, finding the hollow of my throat, the curve of my shoulder, the swell of my breast. I arched into him. There was no logic left, just heat, just want. "Say you want this," he growled, voice low, ragged. I met his eyes, unflinching. "I do." That was all it took. He tugged my underwear down, fast and clumsy, as if the waiting had cost him something. Then he was there, between my legs, breathing hard, hand braced beside my hip as he entered me in one deep, hungry thrust. I gasped. My fingers clawed at his back, at his shoulders, anything to keep from unraveling. He didn't give me time to adjust. He moved with purpose, thrust after thrust, sharp, punishing, grounding me in this moment, in his body, in the way he couldn't seem to slow down. My name left his mouth like a curse. Evie, fuck, Evie. And I answered with nothing but sound. Broken moans, gasps, whimpers that filled the cavernous kitchen and bounced off the marble and steel. He slowed only once, leaning in, forehead against mine, both of us shaking. His voice cracked. It was never her. Not really. Then he took me again, harder this time, like he had something to prove, or destroy. And maybe he did. Maybe we both did. After he didn't speak, he carried me to the couch in the adjacent room, wrapped a blanket around us, and lay there breathing hard, one arm draped heavy across my stomach. His heartbeat thundered under my ear. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't have to. Because for the first time since I entered this house, I wasn't lost. I knew exactly where I was, exactly whose arms held me, and exactly what that meant. I heard her voice before I saw her, soft, crisp, coated in that effortless charm she wore like a tailored glove. "Is this how you treat your guests now, Alexander? No champagne, no headlines?" I was standing at the top of the staircase, coffee mug in hand, barefoot in Alexander's shirt, when I froze. Below me, standing in the center of the marble foyer, was Isabella. Her hair was darker now, cut shorter, her skin paler, though perfectly made up. She wore sunglasses despite the overcast morning, and a coat I'd never seen, black, elegant, defiant. And under it, unmistakably, a swelling curve at her waist. She was pregnant. I gripped the banister, the mug tilted in my hand. Alexander appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his expression unreadable. She turned toward him like she'd rehearsed it. "You look surprised. I thought you might have expected me, eventually." "No," Alexander said flatly. "I expected you never." Their eyes locked, something taut and unfinished passing between them. A memory or a war, maybe both. My feet were rooted to the steps. I hadn't moved. Couldn't. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to. Then Isabella looked up and saw me. Her lips curled, but not into a smile. "Well," she said, "looks like someone's been enjoying the perks of marriage." 10 minutes later, we were seated in the conservatory, a room made of glass and tension. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy. Alexander stood by the windows, arms folded. I sat across from Isabella, knees together, heart hammering. She removed her sunglasses and placed them neatly on the glass table. "You're glowing," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. She raised an eyebrow. "Pregnancy will do that. But thank you, Evie. Always the polite one." The jab was gentle, but it landed. "Why are you here?" Alexander asked, still facing the window. Isabella's eyes stayed on me. "Because the man I ran away for left me. Because I'm tired of being reduced to a rumor. And because I wanted to." See who you replaced me with. I flinched, but she wasn't finished. You really did it, huh? Married my little sister. You always had a thing for the quiet ones. You walked out, Alexander said. She turned to him, voice sharp. Because I found the letter. The room dropped a degree. I looked between them, confused. What letter? Isabella's. Gaze landed on me, suddenly gentler. The letter he wrote, saying he couldn't go through with it, that it wasn't love, that I wasn't what he wanted. My heart skipped. Alexander said nothing. She continued. It never reached me. Your assistant made sure of that. But I found it months later, stuffed into a drawer. By then it was too late. I'd already disappeared. Silence. The kind that scrapes against your ribs from the inside. So I ran, she added. But not from you, Evie. I didn't mean to make you the one who paid the price. I swallowed hard. And now? I asked. She exhaled, resting a hand gently on her stomach. Now I need closure. And maybe to understand if this, she gestured between Alexander and me, is real. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. That night I didn't sleep. The house felt smaller, crowded. I paced my room, the echoes of their past filling the walls like ghosts. He hadn't told me about the letter. He hadn't told me he tried to end it. So what was I? A contingency plan? A convenient replacement? Or worse, a punishment? The knock came just after 2 a.m. I opened the door expecting him. It was her. Isabella stood there in a silk robe, her belly prominent, her eyes softer than they'd been all day. I couldn't sleep, she said. Neither could I. She stepped inside and sat at the edge of the bed. The silence between us stretched, heavy, but not cruel. He changed, she said finally. He was never gentle before. He didn't bend. Not for me. Not for anyone. I said nothing. But now? He looks at you like you're the only thing he doesn't want to control. I looked down at my hands. That's not how it feels. She smiled. You think I don't see it? He softened for you. And believe me, I thought that man incapable of softness. Isabella. I started. But she shook her head. You don't owe me anything, Evie. I just needed to see for myself that the girl I left behind isn't just surviving in my shadow. I felt my throat close. You didn't leave me behind. I walked into it. She touched my arm. Maybe, but you made it yours. Then she stood. I'm leaving in the morning. I won't come back. I just needed to meet the woman who took the life I never wanted and made it her own. And with that, she left, and I cried. Not because I hated her, but because I finally didn't. I left before sunrise. No note. No goodbye. Just the sound of my footsteps echoing down the marble hallway, the feel of my wedding ring still warm on my finger, and the memory of a voice I could no longer trust. Alexander had given me so many truths in pieces, but never the whole. And now that I'd seen the picture, Isabella, the letter, the silence, I realized I'd been filling in the blanks with hope. That was my mistake. He didn't stop me. Not when I packed a single overnight bag. Not when I walked past the study, where he sat, pretending to read. Not even when I turned the handle of the front door. He let me go. And that hurt more than anything else. Back at the bridal shop, everything felt smaller, dimmer. I stayed in the back room, where the walls were cracked. The air smelled like old starch, and the silence didn't carry his name. I didn't cry. I worked, pinned hems, sorted lace, restitched a neckline for a bride who'd never know I existed. But when I pulled open the supply closet on the third day, something fell out. A box, taped shut, labeled in my handwriting. Inside, the dress. My wedding dress. Stained with rain. Still, carrying the faintest trace of his cologne. I should have thrown it out. Instead, I folded it gently, placed it back in the box, and slid it under the table, out of sight. Almost out of reach. Alexander didn't call, but the city whispered for him. By the 5th day, my phone buzzed with texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Where's Mrs. Ravel? Is it true the bride ran again? We heard rumors. The CEO's wife has vanished. Panic burns fast in high places, and by the 6th day, he came to find me. I was alone, sweeping the front steps of the shop, when I heard the engine. A sleek black car pulled to the curb. He stepped out in a charcoal coat, face shadowed under the early evening light. Alexander Ravel looked like a man unmade. His jaw was rough with stubble, his collar undone. His eyes, those cold, controlled eyes, were red around the edges. He said nothing as he walked toward me. I gripped the broom tighter. You shouldn't be here, I said. He stopped in front of me. I know. I waited. He didn't speak, so I turned to go back inside. I read your sketchbook, he said. I froze. I know I shouldn't have. But I did. I turned slowly. Then you saw what I wrote in the margins. He nodded once. You said the house felt like a stage set, that you felt like a prop, that you didn't know if I ever looked at you without seeing her. I crossed my arms. So why are you here? His throat worked. Because I do. The words landed like a stone in water, ripples I didn't want to feel. I see you, Evie. I've seen you since the day you threaded pearls into that goddamn hem without looking up. I pretended not to. I told myself you were just quiet, convenient, safe. He stepped closer. But you're not. He looked wrecked, eyes glassy, voice cracked. You challenged me. Not with anger, not with screaming, but with presence, with steadiness, with that maddening kindness I didn't earn. He exhaled, like the truth hurt to admit. You weren't the lie. You were the truth I didn't think I deserved. Something shattered inside me. The hurt, the silence, the nights I waited for him to choose me. It all rose up and met the man in front of me. And for once, he wasn't untouchable. He was on the verge. So I pushed him the rest of the way. Then why didn't you stop me from leaving? He didn't blink. Because I was afraid if I begged, and you still walked away, I wouldn't survive it. The silence stretched. Then in one sharp breath, he fell to his knees. Right there, on the sidewalk, in front of my family's store, in front of the world. He looked up at me like I was the only thing left standing in the rubble of his own making. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I'm asking you to come home. My heart cracked wide open. I knelt in front of him, gripping his coat, forehead to his. I'm not going back to that house, I whispered. Not unless you tear down everything you built for someone else. He nodded, a raw sound escaping his throat. I already started. Later that night, I followed him back. The house looked different. Boxes by the front door. Isabella's things, packed. Furniture rearranged, piano bench gone. And in the center of the foyer, the photo of her and Alexander. Shattered. Frame. Cracked. Glass swept into a neat pile. He'd done it himself. And in the empty space above the mantel, a blank canvas waited. For us. The second wedding was nothing like the first. No cathedral. No chandelier, no audience, just a garden warmed by afternoon sun, petals falling like confetti from the trees, and a man who was finally mine. Not because of a deal, not because of duty, but because he asked. And this time, I said yes because I wanted to. He stood under the arch we'd rebuilt together. Bare branches wound with fresh ribbon, wildflowers tucked between the twists. No tucks. Just a white shirt, sleeves rolled, collar open like a promise he didn't have to guard anymore. I wore a dress I made myself. Soft ivory. Simple. Bare shoulders, bare feet, bare truth. Alexander reached for my hands, and I let him take them. His grip was firm, warm, grounding. We said no vows, not in the traditional sense. Instead, we spoke like we always should have, raw and unfiltered. "You weren't the bride I expected," he said. "You were the one I needed." "You weren't the man I wanted," I whispered. "You were the one who saw me." The moment hung in the stillness, heavier than any vow. And then, with no officiant, no paperwork, no ceremony, he kissed me, and I knew I was home. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. Love didn't erase the edges of our past. It just softened them enough to hold. We moved Isabella's things out completely. She sent a card, just a few lines, simple and kind. She had found her place, somewhere quieter, and we both wished each other peace. The estate changed too. We opened windows that had never been touched, cleared rooms that once felt haunted. I found my favorite spot beneath the staircase, where the light hit at 3 p.m. and made everything glow. Alexander stopped retreating into silence. He started cooking, breakfast with no shirt on, cracking eggs one-handed, grumbling when he burned toast. He liked watching me sketch across the counter. "That one looks like me," he'd say. "That's because I finally stopped drawing ghosts," I'd reply. He still had his moods, sharp, quiet, intense. But now I didn't fear them. I understood. Them. And he didn't run from mine either. One night, weeks after the second ceremony, I found him in the library. Not his private study, the real library. The one I'd once wandered into by mistake. It had changed. The photo of Isabella was gone. In its place, one of us. Not formal, not posed. Just me sitting cross-legged on the floor, laughing at something he said, hair in my face, pencil behind, one ear. The piano lid was open. He sat at it, not playing, just thinking. When I stepped inside, he looked up, not startled, just quietly waiting. I walked over and sat beside him. "I used to be afraid of this room," I admitted. "Me too," he said. We sat in silence. Not the old kind, the kind that bruised. This one was soft, safe. "I want to give you something," he said suddenly, standing up. He crossed the room and opened a drawer. When he turned around, he was holding something small, wrapped in velvet. My pulse kicked. He sat back beside me, placed it in my hand. "Open it." Inside was a ring, not flashy, not expensive. A simple gold band, delicate and round, with one word engraved inside. Mine. I looked up at him, heart thudding. "I didn't get to choose the first time," he said. "You didn't either. But this..." He reached for my hand and slid the ring, on slowly. "This is us choosing." I swallowed. Hard. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't let them fall. "Forever?" I asked. He leaned in, kissed my temple, then my cheek, then my lips. "Forever," he said. "And not because I lost her. Because I found you." That night, we curled together in bed, skin against skin, limbs tangled like roots. No space between us, no walls, just warmth. The rain came again, tapping against the windows like a lullaby, but this time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like peace. I woke in the dark, sometime past midnight, to find him watching me. What? I whispered, sleepy. He brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. You breathe differently now. I blinked. What does that mean? He smiled. Like someone who knows they're safe? My chest ached in the best way. I touched his face. You do too. He caught my hand, kissed my palm, and pulled me into him like he never planned to let go. And I knew he wouldn't. I wasn't the bride he expected. I wore the dress meant for someone else. I paid for her sins. But in the end, I was the one he chose. Not out of obligation, not by accident, but by love. And that made me the right bride. If this story moved you, even just a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of love, heartbreak, and everything in between. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. Thanks for being part of this journey.